This is the Camp Cooker, a rocket stove design from the Australian company Eco Stoves. If you're interested in hearing my thoughts on it, keep watching. Before we get started, a couple things. First, I'd like to thank Eco Stoves for sending out the Camp Cooker so that I could share it with you. And the next thing, of course, is, yes, I am in my backyard again testing a wood stove. And the reason is, well, you'll see in a minute when we talk about the specifications. In its total package format, this stove is quite heavy, a little bit more than I think is fairer to carry in a backpack, at least for any distance. So I thought what we'd do now is we'll retreat into my home for a few minutes where I'll assemble the stove and go through all its specifications there. And then we'll come back out and we'll build a fire in it. All right, let's put the Eco Stove Camp Cooker together. So this is the stuff sack that everything comes in. We'll lay that aside. There are 6 side pieces. Fire grate for the bottom. Lifting tools for moving the stove around. 3 pieces for the pot support. And an assembly of 3 pieces for the feed ramp. So we'll put those aside. The important pieces to bring out to start with are the sides and the fire grate. Now, in all honesty, when this stove first arrived, I was very doubtful that the stove would go together and form an actual stove and actually stay together. The reason being is, even though there looks like there's locking lugs on the stove, those don't engage with anything. This is done simply by compression and friction. Tabs on one side, slots on the other. So I'll show you what I mean as I go along. So we'll just start with this side obviously being the feed port. All the sides are the same with the exception of the feed port, but the tabs and slots remain the same. And just to begin to assemble them around the outside, working into a 6-sided configuration. The more pieces you put together, the more precarious it feels in your hands. So I have one more. Now, last one gets a little bit more challenging. And I will say that it got a lot easier after the first assembly because you tend to stretch things into shape or bend things into a slight shape to help them to stay together. So there is the stove assembled more or less, or at least the sides, and I'm turning it upside down so the bottom faces up, and you can see that I have the opening next to the feed port. And what I'm going to do now is take the fire grate, and there are slots on all 6 sides, exactly the same. Tabs on all 6 sides of the fire grate, exactly the same. You don't need to start anywhere in particular, but I'll start towards the back. And I'm going to open this up a little bit to allow the fire grate to slide in. Aligning the tabs and the slots together. And as you do, suddenly you seem to be in place. One last step, and I wanted you to be able to see this from this side. The 3 tabs and the 3 slots. I'll say this is probably the most delicate phase of it. It's just a matter of pushing them together, and you're done. That's it. There is no locking tabs and locking slots. They just fit together by compression and friction. And the stove is stable. Now I'll go on to assemble the next step. You can do either or. This will be the, trying to do it backwards for you, the feed ramp. Do you need the feed ramp? No. Does it make life a lot easier? Of course it does. You can feed much longer sticks into this because this is essentially a rocket stove. Again, trying to do this backwards so you can see there the ramp is on. It's actually quite a nice ramp. And then the pot support. Now the pot support is 3 pieces, and the 3 pieces, one piece is different than the other 2, and this one you can see has holes on the outside edges. The reason for that is if you're going to lift this off of the stove while it is hot, while it is burning, it's just the sides you want to lift off, and I'll show you how that's done with the tools that I mentioned a minute ago. The other 2 pieces are the same. They just slide on over, and the last one slides on over the top. And this is how easy it is to drop this on. Literally, you drop it on. Now, I mentioned those tabs on the sides. of 2 pieces. This is where the lifters come in. Lifters can be used to move the stove, but also to move the pot support off easily enough. That's what that's all about. All right, so that's the basic stove configuration. But as I mentioned, EcoStove did also send me some options that I can share with you now. So I'll take that pot support off. And the options are a much larger pot support system. So once again, it's just enlarged and for the same reason, or the same size, just larger. Put the 3 of them together. Oops. There is an order, and that's the order. It goes like this. It'll be obvious. All right, and there you go. Same thing again. Now, what's the benefit of the much larger pot support? It really doesn't add a whole lot in height. There is a little bit, but not much. It's obviously so you can use much larger pots or set much larger pots on. This is plenty big. You could set a Dutch oven on this if you wanted to. Not sure why you might think that, or why you might want to do that, I should say, but you certainly could. The reason you're going to use the larger pot supports is for the windscreen enclosure. So what I'll do is just set the stove aside a little bit. All right, 6 plates that will go together in a similar manner to form, as the sides of the stove did, to form the windscreen. And again, held in place by friction, compression, and yeah, they are a little bit fall apart until you get the last one on, and then they kind of hold themselves together. One more. You can see when you get to this point, you tend to look at it and say, there's no way that last one is going to go in there. This is where the compression or friction comes into play. Trying to make sure that you can see what I'm doing here. If I can get that into play there. There we go. If it's a little bit misshapen because you put them together in a different way than you did from the first time, bend them. That's all there is to it. It's just a matter of bending them a little bit like that. There we go. Okay. Now, pick that up. And the pot supports have slots. Bring it back to the position here. And there are slots on the sides of the windscreen. And now it's just a matter of dropping it down over. There we go. Fully assembled. You have a bit of a windscreen, and you have another further pot support. Now, what was that for? These 2 pieces, yes, they are brand new. I haven't had a reason to use them. That are grill pieces. So these grill pieces can be set inside at different heights. So they kind of go together. They do overlap like this. So now I have a grill that I can cook on the top of the stove. And as you can see, there are notches. The lower, one here, and I suppose you could go to the very top, but you wouldn't have any reason to. Just by rotating, you can raise the height of the grill, or grill I guess is the right word, grill, for different height and different heat arrangement. The last thing we do before we get outside and fire the EcoStove's camp cooker up is to go through a few specifications for it. So the basic stove configuration: height 10.5 inches, diameter 7.5 inches, not including the feed ramp, of course, and weight is 2 pounds 8 ounces here. Now, if you add in the entire package, so that you add in the other larger pot stand, wind guard, and the grill in, and the tools in, and the stuff sack, total package weight will rise to 5 pounds 3 ounces. And it is made in Australia, and it's made using 304 stainless steel. All right, let's get outside and put a fire in it. All right, now just before I light the stove up, a couple things I want to mention. As you can see, I have a couple fire bricks sitting on top of my little testing table that I have built, and that's for the obvious reason, as I pointed out indoors, there is no fire or ash plate. There's just a fire grate, which means hot coals will drop through onto whatever surface below it. So make sure it is a fire-safe surface. Next thing is, as far as lighting up rocket stoves, there's any number of different ways of doing it. I had people tell me in the past that I'm doing it wrong, and I'm thinking that you just have to consider that there are different ways of doing it. My personal favorite is to get a fire lit from the top. In other words, build a little little fire on the bottom, start throwing sticks on the top that are vertical. They don't have to be all that tall. They don't have to come to the very top. They can be halfway up, doesn't really matter. Once the fire is established, that's when you start feeding sticks down the feed ramp. That's just one way of doing it, but I'm going to do it today just a little bit different. Didn't mean for that to drop in yet, but that's okay, it'll work. That's a little bit of wood wool. We're going to light that. And I'm going to be a little less fussy about how I go about getting the fire started. So there are a couple of pieces of wood already in there. And the wood wool I laid on top. And let's see, I think I will drop one or two, no, actually I will fit them all in through the feed ramp. The feed ramp doesn't really come into play until you've got a well-established fire going, and then at that point you can feed quite long sticks in and just feed them in at your leisure or to the rate that you want the fire to burn. And you can hear probably hear that whistle. There is some blasting, some construction in my neighborhood. New housing development, of course. So I'm doing a little bit of both, aren't I? I'm doing some longer ones in from the top and some from the sides. I've got longer sticks yet, of course. We'll just give it a chance to really get going. That's pine that I've been putting in so far. It takes a minute or two for everything. I mean, it's cold out here. It's right just around the freezing mark. When I see the wood really starting to catch on, I will go to the next step, and I think that is right about now. I can hear the pine snapping, as it often does. So what I wanted to show you now is dropping on the large windscreen or pot stand and windscreen so that I can use a good sized pot on it, the one sitting next to the fire. So this is as easy as doing that. You just kind of drop it on, that's it. Now, because of the height in relation to the diameter, you have a lot of airflow being drawn in all around the bottom through the fire grate, through the holes around the base. And that's why we can see the flames extending up so tall right now at this point. You can also hear the snapping, which is very indicative of pine. We'll do that, snap a lot. I'm not quite ready to put a pot on yet, but let's put a stick or two more in. Going to start to make use of the ramp a little bit. Now, I'd say that fire is fairly well established. You can see flames licking out of the top of the stove inside of the windscreen. So let's put the pot on. So the pot I'm using today, brand new pot I'm testing, brand new to me. This is a Fire Maple 2-liter stainless steel pot. Clean. Well, it won't be now. And of course, you have to start the testing process somewhere. Big pot though, a good sized pot. I won't call it a big. 2-liter is a good sized pot, plenty big for one person, plenty big for two people, and an ideal match to this stove. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let this go for a few minutes. And as the initial loading of wood starts to burn down, I'll start to feed in some longer, thicker pieces of hardwood so we can get more of a sustained fire going. And we'll take a couple more views of it, and then we'll wrap the video up. All right, I don't think that took too long. Yeah, nice rolling boil. A couple minutes, that's all it took. That initial load of softwood has all burnt down, got some nice coals. Now I can start putting in some longer pieces of maple. For this demonstration, this is all I'm going to need. They won't take long to light up, and then I can just push them in as necessary and sustain the burn to the level and degree that I feel, whatever the task is, boiling water, cooking, whatever it is that needs to be done, I can control the heat this way. All right, I think that's enough of a demonstration. We can wrap this video up. All right, so what are my closing thoughts on the camp cooker from Eco Stoves? Well, the first thing I'll say about it is that highly efficient as a rocket stove, or maybe I should say highly effective. It does exactly what a rocket stove design is supposed to do: draw air in from the bottom, rush up through the chimney, carry a lot of oxygen, and create a lot of heat, and pretty much smoke-free. Not completely, of course, no stove is, but once a rocket stove really gets going, they burn exceptionally well, and the camp cooker is no different in that regard. First thing I'm going to say, it sounds like a bit of a con, and actually it is. It's a relative con, and that is the wide open fire grate without an ash pan on the bottom. So that's up to you to be cautious of whatever surface you're using this stove on, or any stove for that matter, that doesn't have a ash pan on the bottom. And sometimes even if it does, they can still transfer a lot of heat. Make sure you have a non-combustible surface underneath, whether it's just mineral soil, stones, or like I like to carry with me is one of the fiberglass squares, mats that I can place a stove on top of just for extra safety. So that's fun. Now, here's the big one. We'll often refer to this as the elephant in the room. It's a puzzle stove. Yes, it is. There's no getting around it. In fact, this is more of a puzzle stove than I think any other stove in my collection. Not just the fact that the pieces all have to be fitted together and held together by tension before it will stay together. It's the number of pieces involved here. They don't lock, it's just friction. I mentioned that a number of times during the assembly. They don't actually lock. So for most people, this is going to be a deal breaker right here. It takes a bit of getting used to. Now, once it's together, it is very, very stable. I don't want you to get the impression that it's very fragile, it's going to fall apart. It won't, because it does work as a design to stay together. But the other big thing about this is weight. Yeah, it carries quite a bit of weight. So be clear, it is not a backpacking stove. This is more of a car camping stove, or more of a stove you would take with you when you have some means of conveyance, whether it's on your bicycle maybe, motorcycle, ATV, pulling a poke through the woods in the winter, that type of thing. The size of this actually lends itself well to winter use, because you can get a lot of wood in there, and that's critical in a stove during the winter, is that you'll be able to get enough heat, I call it a critical mass of heat, to be self-sustaining. Tiny stoves can struggle with that. Larger stoves, even if the wood is not perfectly dry, then you can still get a good amount of heat going, that it will draw the wood out, and it will combust, and it will contribute to the heat of the stove and the fire overall. Yeah, so what am I going to say about this? Well, this is really for that person who likes this design, who doesn't mind those handicaps being, one, the weight, and two, the assembly. So I'll leave that out there. Now, of course, what I'll do is I'll put the links to where you can take another look at the stove in the video description, as well as all the physical description of the stove, the specifications, and the like. If you have any comments or questions, put those in the comments section below. And as always, until next time, get out and explore and take that path less traveled, because it will make all the difference. Bye now.